Have you ever seen a moment so powerful that even the highest-ranking officer in the Marines went silent? This is the story of a woman whose past was buried in classified files, until one simple word brought it all back. When a Marine colonel demanded her call sign, she answered Phantom 7, and in that instant, the entire room froze that you're watching grow for justice, where real courage meets untold truth. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe and tell me in the comments, where are you watching this from? Because today's story will remind you that legends never truly disappear. They just wait for the right moment to be recognized again. That IT started at a Marine base on a humid morning in North Carolina. The kind of morning where discipline hangs in the air like the smell of coffee and diesel fuel. Recruits ran drills, sergeants barked orders, and a visiting colonel, decorated, respected, and intimidating, walked toward the hangar for a private inspection. But among the crowd, one person stood out. Not because of her rank, she had none, but because of her quiet, steady presence. Her name tag read simply, E. Reynolds. She wasn't in uniform. She wore civilian clothes, dark jeans, a weather jacket, and the calm gaze of someone who had seen too much. The colonel didn't know who she was. To him, she was just a civilian contractor, maybe maintenance or logistics. Until the whispers started. "Sir," one young Marine said softly, "That's her." "Her who?" the colonel asked. "Phantom 7. The colonel's step slowed. That name wasn't spoken lightly. It belonged to a ghost, a legend whispered about during Black Ops briefings, a shadow that had disappeared years ago after a mission gone horribly wrong. Phantom 7 was supposed to be dead. He turned sharply toward her. "You," he said, his voice hard. "You served before?" She didn't answer. She kept her eyes on the aircraft behind him, a combat-worn F/A-18 Hornet, the kind she once flew. He stepped closer. "I asked you a question, ma'am." She finally looked at him, calm, unshaken. "Yes, sir. A long time ago." "What was your unit?" She hesitated. The hangar grew silent. "Your call sign?" the colonel demanded. For a moment, it felt like time stopped. The distant sounds of jet engines faded. Every Marine nearby waited for her answer. She spoke softly, but the word carried like thunder. "Phantom 7. The colonel froze. His jaw clenched. His face, normally unreadable, turned pale. "That's impossible," he whispered. "You're supposed to be gone?" She finished for him, a small smile breaking her calm expression. "Yes, sir. That's what the report said." Years earlier, Captain Elena Reynolds, call sign Phantom 7, was part of an elite covert flight squadron operating under the radar of even most Marine Command. Their missions were black, untraceable, and often never acknowledged. Her team specialized in extraction under hostile conditions. Missions where failure wasn't an option and success was never celebrated publicly. They were ghosts in the sky. But one mission, Operation Harbinger, changed everything. The team had been dispatched deep into enemy territory to extract a captured Marine reconnaissance unit. During exfiltration, their aircraft took fire. Engines shredded, systems failing. Phantom 7 stayed behind in her aircraft, drawing the fire away from her team's transport. The last radio transmission from her jet was a broken message drowned by static. "Tell them I held the line." The official report listed her as Kia. Her squad never recovered her remains. But what no one knew, what the colonel couldn't possibly have imagined, was that she had survived. She'd ejected at the last second, crashing into dense jungle. For weeks, she crawled through hostile terrain, wounded, hunted, surviving on rainwater and grit. By the time she reached Allied ground, she was barely conscious. Her records had already been closed, and when she saw how her survival had been buried beneath bureaucracy and silence, she made a decision: walk away. She left the service, erased her own trace, and vanished. Now, years later, standing in that hangar, her legend had walked back into reality. The colonel finally found his voice. "You should have been buried with honors." She looked down. "I was buried with lies." The silence between them said more than any medal ever could. The colonel removed his hat, something no one had seen him do before. Around them, Marines stood at attention. Not because they were ordered to, but because instinct told them they were in the presence of someone greater than any rank. Phantom 7, he said quietly. I flew recon during Harbinger. I heard your voice over the comms before your jet went down. You bought us 10 minutes. Without you, none of us would have made it out. For the first time, her composure cracked. Her eyes glistened. Then it was worth it. The colonel took a slow breath. Why come back now? She looked past him toward the young recruits training outside. Because someone has to remind them what it means to serve without being seen. Over the next few weeks, word spread across the base like wildfire. The legend of Phantom 7 was no longer rumor. It was fact. The Marines she'd once saved came to visit her quietly, each one carrying the same haunted gratitude point. One night, after sunset, the colonel invited her to the memorial wall. Names of fallen soldiers gleamed under the floodlights. Among them was hers, engraved in steel, a ghost frozen in time. She stood before it silently. You can have it removed, he said softly. We can correct the record. But she shook her head. Leave it. That name belongs to who I was. I'm not her anymore. He studied her for a long moment. Then who are you now? She smiled faintly. Just someone who remembers. Weeks later, the base hosted an annual remembrance ceremony. The colonel took the podium, his voice carrying over the crowd. But instead of reading from his notes, he paused. There are some heroes whose names never make the news. Some whose courage never gets recognized. Not because they failed, but because their missions were too dangerous, too secret, or too painful to tell. Today, one of those heroes stands among us. The crowd turned as the colonel gestured toward the back. Elena stood there, uncomfortable, humbled, but unable to hide any longer. The Marines saluted in unison. It wasn't for a rank. It was for a legacy to... As the ceremony ended, the colonel stepped down and whispered to her, the world forgot Phantom 7, but the Marines never will. She smiled through tears. Then that's enough. That night, as the sun set over the base, Elena stood by the runway watching the jets soar overhead. The sound of the engines was both haunting and healing. She whispered softly into the wind, as if speaking to ghosts only she could hear. Phantom 7, signing off. But this time, it wasn't a farewell, it was peace. And that's the story, friends. Sometimes the bravest warriors aren't the ones we see on TV or in medals. They're the ones who disappear quietly after doing what had to be done. The ones who never asked for glory but carried the weight of duty anyway. That you're watching Grow for Justice, where stories of truth and sacrifice live on. That if this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe, hit that bell icon, and tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Because courage like this deserves to be remembered everywhere.